Coming up in today's episode, we're going to be sanding some rather weathered and tired looking alloy wheels. We'll also be removing and scrubbing mould off the back of the car and also the rest of the interior, blasting some mud out the wheel arches, and much more. So welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be working on this 2009 Vauxhall Tigra. Now if you're not familiar with these will be badged as Opel in the rest of Europe. Vauxhall's a UK brand only, and they're part of the GM group, or were at the time. Now this little car's covered about 85,000 miles. It's not bad, it's just a bit grubby really, so we're going to be scrubbing away the years of filth, but the worst part are these alloy wheels. And we're going to be really sort of in depth on these today and showing you a little trick you can do to try and restore them. Now because I'm going to be leaving this car jacked up overnight on my mobile lift, I've done things in a slightly different order than I usually would. So I started off in the engine bay. I've used Kosh Chemie all-purpose cleaner Green Star at 10:1, let it soak in for a little bit. I've then given it an agitation and scrub with some various brushes, and then it's just simply blasting it off. So with the main wash done, I can now look to raise the car up on the mobile lift. This thing's hydraulically operated, and the great thing about it is once you've got it into the position you want, it literally sort of clicks out on some safety locks. You can remove the hydraulic cables, take the control box away, and it just stays static in the air for as long as you want it to be. All we're going to do after that is remove these alloy wheels, and we've got quite a bit of mud in the rear arches. In fact, I think you can sort of grow cabbages in the back of there. So we'll give them a good thorough clean and blast out with the jet wash. Before and after on this is pretty good actually. And then once that's done, we'll move on to the alloy wheels and get them cleaned prior to sanding them and reworking them. So the reason why these wheels go a bit corroded and look awful is initially they get the whole alloy wheel and they'll powder coat it typically in one colour, so it would have been grey. Then what happens is the wheel's bolted to a lathe and a mechanical arm comes down and it skims a very fine layer of metal off the face of it. It's almost like diamond cut and it gives this very nice polished effect, and all they do after that is just re-lacquer over the top of it. Now this effect looks fantastic, but unfortunately if you get a slight stone chip or damage to that clear coat, the lacquer on the top, and you get water ingress and things like rock salt from the road in the winter, it'll get in behind it and start corroding that bare aluminium, and as we can see on screen this is what happens, it starts to sort of go all blotchy and horrible. And the customer got really lucky with this car because the previous owner had damaged the face of the alloy wheel with a bit of curbing, but the grey insert part of it hadn't been damaged. If that had been scraped or scuffed really badly or curbed, there was nothing I would have been able to do with it. But as I said, all four wheels, it was just the polished face that was damaged. So the aim of the game with this is just to give it sort of like an 80% improvement. I can't duplicate the finish the machine does in a diamond lathe. However, what I'm going to do is initially go over with 80 grit sanding discs, then I'll go down to 240 and then 500. Then after that, what I'm going to do is go over the 2,500 grit Averon wet and dry sanding pad. What that's going to do is give this wheel more like a brushed aluminium effect. And once I lacquer over the top of that and seal it all in again so it doesn't corrode, it'll look pretty good. As I say, the car's got some sort of brushed aluminium accents on the outside of it in the grille and the rear sort of tailgate, so I thought it's going to match quite well with that. Another thing is we have to bear in mind this car has a value of around about, I don't know, £2,000 or under, maybe it's 1,500 quid. So to have these professionally diamond cut again, if they could do it, sometimes they won't do it more than once, could be in the region of around about £350. On top of that, as we're about to see on camera, it had these little tiny brushed aluminium effect centre caps as well, and the wheel refurbishment company wouldn't even do anything with those, so they would just recommend you go and buy a new set from Vauxhall. And because of the nature of their intricate design, I should imagine they're probably in the region of about £100 for 4 or even more. So when we start talking about a refurbishment package of around about, £350 maybe, plus another £100 for the centre caps, you're at £450 on a car that's got a value of £1,500. It's just not economically viable. So the face of the wheel's pretty much there. All I need to do now is key up the grey areas. So I'm very delicately going to go around with some wet and dry sandpaper. Just one of these Avalon pads again. Just want to sort of just scratch the surface very, very microscopically enough so that when I re-lacquer the wheel, the lacquer can bite into that grey area as well and adhere properly, so it protects the entire face of the alloy wheel. It's important to re-lacquer the wheel because if we don't, that bare aluminium is going to start corroding and discolouring almost immediately. And a little trick, if you're ever painting a wheel at home, a piece of garden hose, which I've got there, usually fits perfectly over the valve cover. Now another thing we need to do, let's say, is these centre caps are just absolutely disgusting and awful. So on the back of it, there's a couple of locating pins, and if we push those out, what that's going to do is allow us to remove the centre badge, as we're about to show on screen. There we go. And that's going to enable me to go around and get that sanded. It's also bonded, so when you reattach these, you might want to put a bit of glue or sticker flex or sealant on there. So the process here is exactly the same as doing the alloy wheels. I've gone probably 240 on this grit, then 500, and then I'm going to go over the centre section by hand because that was a little bit more intricate. I couldn't get the sander in there. And then after that I'm going to use one of these Avalon 3000 discs just to sort of buff that metal up just before I sort of go over the lacquer. I don't want it too shiny because it's going to look a bit too over the top. So I want to remain a little bit of a sort of matte finish to it to give it that brushed aluminium look at the end. And once the wheels are lacquered, here's a bit of a before and after. So marked improvement. They look a lot better than they did. So the inside of this car got a quick vacuum, it wasn't that bad, but this plastic area on the back was showing signs of mould, and you had to sort of notice it if you've got a keen eye. And as soon as I gave it a scrub with this little scrub it pad, it literally changed colour. Absolutely disgusting. So it was basically go around the whole of the interior with the scrub it pad and some clean microfiber cloths and just make sure all the surfaces got thoroughly deep cleaned. I'm not sure the car had a water leak. These can suffer, these little Vauxhalls. The bulkhead basically where the pedal box comes through was notorious for leaking on these models of Vauxhall Tigras, Corsas and the combo vans as well. Usually a telltale sign of that would be sort of soggy carpets. This wasn't suffering from that, so could just have a window left open at some point, a little bit of damp's got in there and a little bit of moulds sort of appeared on the surfaces. It wasn't horrendous. Some of the touch areas like the sun visors and control stalks had makeup, the usual on it. So just go around, scrub everything. Then afterwards I've gone over with some Koshka Top Star dressing and just rub that onto the interior seats, things like that, and it's just given it a nice sort of matte sort of finish, which not too shiny but not completely dull and standard. As we can see, there's a decent amount of filth removed from the inside of that car considering the small size. Once that's done, I can start looking at the bodywork. There's a few little scuffs. This rear bumper had a little bit of a knock. It wasn't going to be improved to absolute perfection, but it did look like somebody had sort of tried to do something with it. They almost gone over with a Brillo pad or like a pan scrubber or something, and the surface had gone a bit dull. So the aim of the game, I thought if I give this a good machine polish and then touch it up afterwards, it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be sort of a 60-70% improvement. So what I've gone over here originally is some Kosh Chemie H902 heavy cut compound. After that I've finished up with some Rupes Uno all-in-one sort of sealant and protect to give a bit more gloss to that black paintwork. And then for the finale I've gone over with some Kosh Chemie sealant over the top. I've been using this stuff a little while, find it really easy to use, just spray it on, give it a couple of seconds, buff it off, adds a little bit of extra gloss and a bit more of a protection on the surface as well. And after that we've only got a few more things to do. I'm going to do little bits of trim around the mirror housings, and also then I'll do is clean the glass, and then for the finale I've got some black touch-up paint provided by the customer, so I'll just go around doing things like door edges, any little scuffs on the bumpers, etc., stone chips on the bonnet, just to make it look that little bit nicer. So with the tyre dressing now applied, we can take the car outside and do a few before and afters. It's not the worst car I've ever done, but we've definitely made a massive improvement. The wheels were the focal point I think on this car, and they were just spoiling it. I saw that along with a bit of dull paintwork as well and a lackluster engine bay. Just sort of doing all these little things has just really improved and enhanced this car, so when it goes up for sale it just looks a little bit better than the rest advertised. It always shocks me how poorly prepared some cars are under a certain price point. Some motor traders, once they get to sort of £3,000 and under, just don't bother. So when cars like this have that little bit of extra time spent on them, they definitely stand out from the crowd. As always, thank you for watching. I'll have another video next week. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a van, I'm just not sure which one it's going to be yet. It might be a Renault Kangoo or a Citroen Berlingo, so either or it's probably going to be a commercial. Both are quite grubby and quite old, so I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.